Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Todd Maurer with Versatile PhD. Welcome to our latest edition of PhD Pathways. I'm really excited today to welcome Kaidi Wu, and she will talk a lot about herself and her own journey and brings a tremendous amount of insight. And the title of today's program is Debunking Academia versus Industry Myths, Be the Entrepreneur of Your Own Career. This is a theme that's kind of dear to my heart, and certainly if you've looked at any of our other programs going back years, this idea of harnessing your own entrepreneurial skills for your career is very resonant, very important to any beginning or at any stage of your career journey. So I'm really happy to have Kaidi here. Just a bit of background. These events are about an hour. You can basically use a Q&A bar at the bottom of your screen to submit questions at any time. I'll monitor them. Kaidi will be probably in her mode of discussion, but I'll certainly monitor them. We can generally have them after Kaidi's short presentation, or if there's something that's more pertinent at that particular time, I'll try and respond in a timely manner. But in any case, we'll get your questions answered. Also, this is a recorded event. We will send some links to the event later on, probably tomorrow. So you can go back and listen to the recording. We'll also have a lot of information on Dr. Wu's activities today and her coaching business, and a lot of the contact information that you might need. So just shortly, Kaidi Wu is a social psychologist, schooled at University of Michigan. Very interesting background, went on and worked at Amazon, Meta, and Match. So she's got a lot of entrepreneurial and big company experiences. Did her postdoc at UC San Diego, and we'll talk about how she works with PhDs today to fulfill their own careers. And so with that, I'd like to welcome you, Kaidi. Thank you for taking the time to share your insights today. And I will pass it over to you. Again, the format will be, I think you're going to spend about, I don't know, 15, 20 minutes on your talk, and then we'll have plenty of time for Q&A for the remainder of the hour. So welcome, and really happy to have you here.
Yeah, awesome. Thanks for having me. So let me share my screen. Okay, can you guys see?
Yes.
Okay, awesome. So I will start. So thanks for the introduction. I want to start off by presenting this graph, which is less than a third of PhD graduates have tenure track positions. Now, this is not news in particular. Give me 1 second to make sure my notes show up. Yes. And the vast majority of PhDs are kind of just left out to figure out the labyrinth of a non-academic job market on their own. Now, this is not news, and it has been this way for decades. But two things have changed. One is the belief about leaving academia. Used to be heavily stigmatized. We used to have all these beliefs around you are a failure if you left. Academia is really the only respected route. That belief is still held at many institutions, but it's kind of suppressed. Now, if you have a glorified 300K job at a tech company right outside of grad school, wow, that is fantastic. So that path has been kind of more open than before. Second is we are now at the maturity stage of social media. A lot of the experiences, values, education is now being democratized. We can access other people's experiences, including this podcast, on our phone, in our pocket. So the paths have become a lot more diverse, and there's a lot to do with your PhD that's not so heavily stigmatized as before. And with that, I want to share with you a little bit about my journey. Graduated from the University of Michigan with a PhD in social psychology. I graduated right into the pandemic, never walked the graduation stage, just in my home, went to my postdoc, moved in the middle of the pandemic. for my postdoc for 2 years. After that, I worked in big tech at Amazon, Meta, and Match. And after that, I started my own business called The Academic Trailblazer, helping other PhDs with their career transition. Now, if you speak to PhDs about their career trajectory, which I've spoken to hundreds of them by now, you'll realize what I just painted for you is a big fat lie. This is a resume version, okay? This is the resume marketing document version of my life, which is not real. And in fact, you'll find out very quickly, very few academics' paths are linear, and that includes tenured professors, and neither was mine. So I want to show you my real CV of failure. Now, this is what really happened. I turned down a professorship offer after I graduated. I chose between that and my postdoc because of immigration constraints. I spent 2 years, 400 applications, 60 interviews. After a bunch of offer withdrawals, after my failed negotiation, I landed my $250K job at Amazon. I had a competing offer valued at the same price. I felt that was what I deserved, and I got it. But unfortunately, there's the mass layoff. I was stranded on my visa a couple of times. I went to work for Match. I went to work for Meta, which I got laid off again. After that, I leveled up to senior, but I took $100,000 pay cut because of how horribly the economy was doing. Leaving academia was extremely difficult. And I actually continued to go on the academic job market for 5 years. I submitted 256 applications, went on a bunch of job talks. But I think what's a lot more difficult, a lot lonelier, is to walk the path that many ex-academics touted to be the panacea. Industry, you'll triumph on the other end. And I only walk that path to discover the reality as a lot uglier than what's painted on social media. There are a couple of myths about industry that you probably have heard before that I want to talk about from a more realistic point of view. The number one thing about industry people say is industry always pays better than academia. I've worked with clients from all over the world. I myself have gotten multiple offers from big tech to nonprofit to small, medium companies. Overall, on average, you get paid $100K when you look at the data across different disciplines, across different PhDs. When you look at the salaries offered by professorship positions from liberal arts colleges, really good R1 universities, that's about the same. It's on par with what they're paying as well, at least in social sciences. Now, when you kick it up a notch and you look at tenure track business schools offers at R1 universities, they pay about $200,000, give or take. Some pay even more than that. Factor into also, there are different kinds of positions. We tend to say industry as tech, but it's not just tech. Nonprofits, startups, governmental positions, they pay a lot lower than the tech industry. Passion industries like gaming or dating, these topics that people are passionate about, even non-academics, because of the fierce competition, they also pay low. European positions, Canadian positions, anything that's not American, they pay significantly lower than what we're used to when it comes to the American standard. Last point, companies typically know PhDs are financially illiterate. We've been paid peanuts and we thought to ourselves, we're not in it for the money. So if you don't learn the language of money, you will almost always be lowballed, almost guaranteed. The second point about industry people often make is that industry is a lot more honest than academia. One of the ex-academics before I went through my own transition told me industry cares a lot more about the truth. For truth benefits product decisions that make the company's money. And who doesn't love money? So of course, there's no reason to cheat. There's no reason to p-hack. That's the rationale. But it turns out industry too loves very neat and convenient stories tied up in a bow, just like academia, to tell a story that leadership finds appealing. Sometimes you'll find that senior leadership already has the story written up in their minds, and they expect research to be performed to fit them. One interesting note, research is often last to hire, first to fire. And this was felt very viscerally by a lot of the PhDs that got laid off in 2023. Struggle to get a seat at the table, still a big problem today. Third thing is industry offers great work-life balance, which I found to be the most comical of all. Corporate jobs typically demand that you work from 8 to 5. And the hours get a lot worse if you work across time zones. And here's the thing, it doesn't really matter which time zone you're in. The person asked to work at worse times is often the person who's lower on the corporate hierarchy, which would be you, starting at the bottom of the corporate ladder, coming fresh from academia. If you have a divergent chronotype, a disability, or you relish vast amounts of uninterrupted time for deep work, which is what academics do, you'll quickly look at burnout in a 9-to-5 back-to-back meeting structure and slack pains that require constant attention like a dog. Number 4, industry jobs are just as intellectually fulfilling. Now, this statement is probably one of the least contested statements out of all, because a lot of ex-academics who did leave academia for industry, they do miss the intellectual fulfillment, the intellectual rigor. And that speaks to one of the core distinctions between academia and industry, which is industry jobs, they tend to be skill-centric, not domain-centric. So academia, you spend a lot of time, decades, developing domain knowledge, and you become an established authority on that topic. Versus in the industry, you develop a skill to be used in different domains, data science, UX research. It doesn't matter if you do this in dating, it doesn't matter you do this in reality labs, finance, you kind of just pick it up, but the skill remains constant. And in a competitive job market where everybody hops places every 2 to 3 years, which you're supposed to do, you're supposed to be agnostic to whatever sector you apply your skills to. And number 5, industry jobs are a lot more impactful. This I had a lot of doubt because, well, one of the things that semi-true about the statement is the academic shelf life is on average 7 years, meaning from the time you have published that paper stays on the shelf for 7 years before it hits the street, before it has real impact. But I want to think about this from a different aspect, which is a lot of the greatest discoveries that changed humanity. They came from discovery research. They didn't come from tactical research that can be done in 3 days and has an immediate impact. A lot of the longer term impact, we don't know. We can't see into the future, but they have real tangible value as time goes on that often transforms society at large. Impact is also a question that has riddled creative minds for centuries. It's very interesting to think about academics as similar to artists, to musicians, to comedians, because we in some ways are. We're thinking very original thoughts. And when we think about, what is the point of writing? What is the point of a book? It's not driving a bus. It's not performing heart surgery. What impact does it have? But that is impact if you think about it, because if you pull someone out of the darkness, if your words inspire someone to take action, if your thought changes minds at scale, that is tremendous impact. I get moved. I think Trevor Noah has more impact on huge auditoriums, on society at large, than some DEI training at a tech company nobody cares about. So here's something else to think about when people give you that argument. Industry is just about impact because they're thinking about impact in terms of business metrics only. Okay, so with these distinctions in mind, I didn't know any of these, and I was slaving away in corporate. And for months and months, I had 2 friends. I had Google and depression. And I thought that was very interesting that you see this bifurcation on LinkedIn, on Google, on Quora, Reddit, of academics raving about industry on the one hand, and then non-academics bashing the 9-to-5. And the feed is very interesting. And I thought to myself, how poorly must academics have been treated? How poorly must they have been paid for them to be grateful to even have a 9-to-5 job that everyone else seems to be hating? And I couldn't find any answers in my immediate surrounding because they're either academics who despise the academics who went to industry, or academics in industry who despise the academics who stayed in academia. So I went online and I searched for all of these blogs. One of them outlined a step-by-step guide to escape the golden handcuffs, from being a digital nomad to being a monk to dumpster diving. And I was like, that's me. I would rather do that and then getting out of whatever I was in back then. So I hired him as my coach to get me out of the very jobs that I spent years and money getting into, ironically. And I think that spoke to one of the core existential fears, not just academics have, which is the question, who am I? And for academics, it's who am I if I'm no longer an academic? And it was a very scary question to have. And I think one of the things that helped me address that question is that you can always be an academic. Let me explain. There's a distinction between academic research and academic system. When we talk about being an academic, we mean being in the academic system. I graduate from a PhD program, I do a postdoc, I get grants, I become an assistant professor, so on and so forth. We are an employee in that academic system. So if you strip away the title, the position, the university, I'm no longer in the system, so I'm no longer an academic. But that's only one way to think about it. You can always be an academic. What is an academic? An academic is anything that's associated with higher learning, with original thinking. It's embodying all the stuff that you do in academia, but not necessarily in academia. So you can always preserve that academic identity. What are the things that you do in academia? For a lot of disciplines, it's very similar: research, teaching, service. Under research, you have thinking original thoughts, you have designing experiments, you have things to do with data, and then you have communicating these ideas. That includes speaking, that includes writing, talking with journalists. You have teaching, I have public speaking, I have good experience making people laugh. I can inspire people, I can break down complex concepts. And under service, you have management skills, you have organizing, you have helping other people realizing their potential. These are all valuable skills. If you pick and choose the skills that speak to you the most in academia, you can become other things that pay you a lot of money. So if you really like data, you can be a data scientist. If you like thinking original thoughts, if you like writing, you have a way with words, go become a writer. There's a scientific writer, there's different kinds of writers. If you're really good at organizing, management, you can go become a product manager. And if you're really good at academic fraud and deceiving people, you can go become an entrepreneur, successful one in Silicon Valley. And that is the meaning of an academic. So you can be an academic, let me see, one sec, in academia. And one of the things that's very hard to think outside of that mold is because we are never asked, what do we want out of life? And I do this exercise called the bubbles exercise with every student in my coaching program, one-on-one or group coaching, which is to ask, what do you want in your life? PhDs don't get asked what they want out of their life because you don't get a choice where to live. You go where the job goes. You don't get a choice how to spend your time, who to work with, because who are you to say who you don't want to work with? You're lucky enough just to receive the privilege of working with an R1 professor. So a lot of the stuff, we are not really asked. And I asked everybody to draw this map. And if you are on this webinar, and I encourage you to do this as well, what matters to me the most, these are the common domains of significance to people: career, relationships, health, hobbies, where to live, finance. And for you, you may have other things. And I want you to draw them with the size that corresponds to the importance of them in your own life. Within your each bubble, You also have the things that you value. For example, within the career bubble, what is more important to me? Is time? Is it intellectual rigor? Is it having peers that are invigorating that I can bounce ideas off of? Is it having a healthy environment? Do this, and I want you to pay attention to all the feelings that bubble up during this exercise. What do I want and what do I not want? We don't get to do this a lot in our daily lives because a lot of our wants and desires are engineered by the media and culture around us. And that culture typically comes in a script. I'm a cultural psychologist, and that script is very universal for industrialized societies, which is you're born, you go to school, get a job, get married, although the marriage might change now, and then you die. And notice that I skip retirement. And this is because most Americans nowadays can't afford to retire. As many as 80% of households with older adults are now financially struggling. They either have to downsize their home, sell their home, or go back to work. In fact, many adults don't expect to retire at all. They have to work until they die. And it doesn't have to be this way. You can structure your life in a completely different way. So let me give you where I am now compared to that messy map that I showed you before. Today, I'm a solopreneur. I run a business of my own, helping PhDs with their career transition. I teach, I advise, I mentor people I care deeply about on a topic that I've had a lot of experience and knowledge in. Ironically, even though I didn't like teaching that much back when I was in academia, I am now teaching, just not being told by a university to teach some subject that I know nothing about. I do comedy and I create a lot of content online. I compete and perform a lot in dance across the country. All the while, this still leaves me time to do and talk about research, the kind of research that I really want to do, the kind of research that's on the edge. And this is not to just fill another line on my CV, because now I have no incentives to. At any time, I can scale these identities up and down, professionally or recreationally, to suit how I'd like to spend my time. How much money do I want to make this year, next 5 years? Who do I like to work with the most, and who do I like to spend time conversing interesting ideas with? The entire time, I documented what I was going through, my journey, what was I doing. I share all of what I learned with random strangers on the internet. This is my life now, and I love it. A peculiar thing happened when I started doing this instead of blindly submitting resumes to companies and convincing them to like me. Companies now reached out to me. Universities started reaching out to me. Content creators reached out to me. Podcasters reached out to me. They saw my content, they saw my journey, and they say, we love what you're doing. In fact, we have all of these problems that you were talking about. Can you solve it for us? And I was like, oh, I don't have time. And they said, well, okay, we'll pay you. We will make up a position. How about we just hire you? That's fucking fantastic. Because I realized the more you don't need a job, the more they want to give you a job. And now people want you. You are not just a cog, replaceable. By definition, if you are to be hired, the definition is that if you were to die tomorrow, they can replace you with another person. Hence, they're hiring you to do the job for a fraction of the profits. Now you are irreplaceable because you are your own unique combination of talent, of skill, of personality, of the thing that they like. They approach you first. They want you. So I have now a lot more say in where I'd like to work, when I'd like to work, how I'd like to work. If you don't want me, okay, go somewhere else. But they can't find that someone else because there's only one Katie, just like there's only one you. And that's when I realized money is not tied to skills. Money is not tied to experience. We think money is tied to skills because that's what we've seen on job ads. We have salary range, job title, but it's not. Money is tied to the amount of value you provide to whoever sees that value in you. And that is why some academics pay $1,000 just to speak for a conference whereas others gets paid $100,000 just for one speech. You can charge however much other people are willing to pay, as long as you stay in the competitive market, as long as you know how to market and sell your skills. And this is the skill academia or industry doesn't teach you, to sell yourself and to the language, to learn to speak the language of money. When you do this, sky becomes the limit as to how far you can go. And I want to get this idea out there when we talk about networking, when we talk about making ourselves competitive. In the 2010s, networking is about who you know. Back then, MBAs were valuable because there's no other way to access a network unless you pay $50,000, $80,000 just to get into the club. But in 2020s, networking is who knows you. You have everything you need in your pocket. You can hop on LinkedIn, you can hop on Twitter, YouTube, Substack. There's all of that. And people will notice. Algorithms will do its job. You can put your thoughts, your values, your content, which is your publications, which is your ideas, your data out there for other people to find you, billions of people across the world. I want to give you a couple of examples, and these are the people that I wrote down. In my own pit of despair, I thought, who are the academics who are not following the traditional path? Are there any out there? And it turns out there are plenty. Here is Rob Henderson. I didn't know who Rob Henderson was in 2019. All I did was read a few articles in magazines that he's published, magazines that I published too, and I thought they were nothing, they were one-offs, but he kept building on them. He started a newsletter of his own. He built a gigantic 150,000 following on Twitter. This is the size of following where you go to an airport and somebody will come up to you and say, hey, I know you. No, this is your fame metric. Because he built such an avid readership, he was able to sell a bestseller, doesn't even need the agents to do the job. He attracted a faculty job tailor-made for him because they saw his ideas. It was interesting enough. They know it will sell. And because of the success of the bestseller, he sold the film rights, and I have no doubt he'll make a boatload of money if he's not already doing so. So he continues to make a living off of writing original ideas. This is Ali Abdaad. He was a medical doctor, an MD, started making YouTube videos about himself playing the guitar. Very quickly found out the internet is a brutally honest place. They will let you know we don't give a shit about your guitar skills. But the internet did give a shit about his advice for medical students to get into medical school because this is what he knows. So he kept doing them. And after he did a couple of videos, people started reaching out about how do you stay productive? So he tailored whatever he had to offer, whatever things that he enjoyed to what the market needs. With that, in a few years, he grew to millions of subscribers on YouTube. He now runs a podcast. He teaches a YouTube academy because now people want to know how you became a successful YouTuber. He made $5.7 million, I think, this year or last year, but he was consistently making millions a year. In a year, the amount of money he makes can retire an entire person. He no longer is a medical doctor, although he could be. He could go back to being a medical doctor if he wanted to. Countless examples. Erika Kullberg is a lawyer, also personal finance influencer. Vivian Tu, $2 to $3 million a year, pays herself $300,000 just to stay comfortable. Also personal finance. You don't even need to be a professional, academic professional to immerse yourself in academic research. Chris Williamson, bullied at school, bored on Love Island, now has a podcast where he interviews all of these evolutionary psychologists, all of these scientists, researchers on research. And this bro knows more about evolutionary psych than I do. And I listen to him because it's much knowledgeable than even the old school literature itself. Lastly, Alex datepsych, I don't know his last name. It goes to show you don't even need to show your name or face to be on social media. talks about research, conducts research in real time. He just asks a question, what kind of hobbies men do give women the ick? Interesting question. Nobody knows. Does the research right there, post the data in real time, no peer review, nothing. It just shows you, and later on he can publish this in peer review, gets it more refined. But this becomes the new way of doing things, where at the very beginning, the dawn of the value economy. People call it the content economy, the creators economy, but I like to call it, as Dan Koh, another creator, calls it, the value economy, which is we all have value to provide, academics or not. You put this out there, you let people find you. And it doesn't matter if you want to do your own thing. It doesn't matter if you are in traditional academia going the tenure ladder. It doesn't matter if you're industry. Everybody is doing this on YouTube, on LinkedIn, on Twitter. You tell people, this is who I am. This is my lifelong portfolio. This is a very realistic CV, instead of something that you market and you try to sell to people who don't necessarily want you. And I want to end by saying that nowadays, there is no such thing as job security. We see it in the pandemic, where a pandemic can sweep off your entire department. Doesn't matter you have tenure or not. Tenured professors who spoke out got their tenure revoked, got put on leave. Industry, see the mass layoffs that are still occurring, they will continue to occur. And the pay is not going to be as great as you had during the late stage of the pandemic. The only true job security you have is to not have your livelihood tied to a job, so that a single employer cannot single-handedly end your livelihood. And it doesn't matter which path you pick, industry, academia, solopreneurship. If you leverage your own unique combination of expertise to build up a portfolio of income streams, of your own career identities, and you follow the template that's been replicated successfully by so many other professionals who now have the freedom to do what they love, it is quite possible to achieve financial independence and to create and design a life that you would love to live. Do this, and if you do everything right and persist, your job becomes your hobby. And you do the things for the love of it, not because you have to do this for a paycheck. This is all very easy to say, very hard to do. So I go over some of the job stuff in my Academic Trailblazer life program. I go over tangible job tips. If you want to go over into corporate, I go into the big picture things in terms of how to design and create a life that you want to live as well. So with that, I will shut up, and we can have a conversation and do Q&A.
Great. Kaidi, thanks for that very inspiring and exciting presentation and original presentation. I didn't know you were a Latin dancer, among other many things. So that was really, really wonderful. So I'll just remind everyone that you can submit any questions you want to Kaidi on the in the Q&A panel or the chat panel, whichever you want to use at the bottom of your screen. I want to start just with a couple of questions. So I want to go back to, you had a slide up there. You don't have to put it up now, but you had a slide which said, what is an academic? So I'm thinking back at your bridge between kind of postdoc and going and working for Amazon, right? So obviously you kind of brushed over the idea, well, it was 400 interviews, or 400, not 400 interviews, but 400 resumes sent out and so forth. How are you able to, at that time, unpack all of the different kind of PhD qualities to be used outside of academia? I mean, did you consciously think about all the different things that could be sold to Amazon as a character trait, skill, value proposition? Did it come naturally to you? Because we've noticed, I mean, so I did a talk a long time ago on kind of unpacking your PhD, and one of the issues that a lot of our students face is just their ability to look at their transferable skills and say, okay, this is something that I hadn't thought about. I hadn't thought that mentorship or teaching would be an interesting thing to discuss with someone at Amazon, for example. So can you talk about how you made that jump? And maybe, I mean, clearly it was a long process for you. It was a lot of work, a lot of applications, but what lessons did you learn in that particular phase, kind of making that first leap?
Yeah. Your resume is not a resume. Your resume is a marketing document. Doesn't even need to be true. In fact, a lot of people lie. I wouldn't call it lying, reframing.
Embellishing.
The reason I say this is this. Companies don't care you have a PhD. Companies don't care that you are an academic. Most of the skills that we frame in the academic speak will not speak to Amazon. It's like if I'm suddenly speaking Chinese to you, and then you're like, what the fuck is wrong with this person? But that's how, if you think through the minds of a recruiter and a hiring manager, you suddenly see whatever that they are looking for. And what they're looking for typically is one, a set of core skills that the job requires, which many PhDs do have. And this includes putting together, like thinking about a research question, breaking down a complex problem, formulating it into a hypothesis, run do interviews, run surveys, whatnot, and then data presenting. But it also includes this product knowledge, which we also call navigating stakeholder relationships, thinking about things in terms of product. And that is the hardest part to translate from an academic to industry, because the projects we work on, oftentimes they are academic discovery type of projects. They're very vague, they're very theoretical. Companies want what percentage of cancellation rate did you reduce? How much engagement, more engagement? What are the business metrics? You have to put them in precise languages, in practical terms that companies can understand. Related to that, all of that stakeholder navigation, it comes with the industry setting. You will pick it up on the job, but on your resume, you have to be very clear in terms of how you work with other people. That includes your mentorship, that includes working with your advisor, except you call them your stakeholders instead of your advisor. That includes working with IRB, which is similar to legal in companies. You just call them legal instead of IRB. You put them into words that companies can understand, and then you show them, hey, I have a very valuable set of skills that will be of a lot of use to you. And you put that on your resume. So core skill fit and industry knowledge fit. These are the two most essential things you should put on your resume just to get your foot in the door, so then in interviews, you can convince them how great of a person I am.
Interesting. So, I mean, psychology and linguistics are really important in making that jump. I mean, I just know, coming from the corporate world as well, that there is a kind of a chasm of understanding between many corporations and academia. So I think that's a really good point. There was a question that came in here again, and I'm just putting it in this section because you had talked about losing your job at Amazon. How did you navigate the visa situation? One of the attendees asked, since that is something beyond our control. Anything, I mean, is there anything to say about that, or are you just basically working against the clock?
Prevention is the greatest medicine. When you're starting to worry about your visa, it's already too late. I would never, ever, ever want anybody to be in my situation, which is why it's always good to have education before you even start the process. It's almost like one of my dating coaches used to say, you should actually receive dating education before you go on the dating market. Same thing with the job market, same thing with the immigration market. The advice I often give to international students in the United States is that you should start looking to get your own green card before you even finish your PhD program. If you have a couple of publications, you have some citations, you have 10 peer reviews done for journals, recommend you go wegreens.com, you get an evaluation. There are a couple of agencies you can get an evaluation to see whatever you need. There are 2 green cards. One is called EB1A, one is called NIW. These two are self-sponsored. Your livelihood is not tied to the company. If you can get these green cards on your own, you can permanently stay in the United States, and you decouple all of that anxiety, the visa, holding the visa over your head from the company. You can actually have a lot more opportunities open up to you. The two things I want to say, if you don't have this, there are the two consequences. One, your opportunities shrink, which means when you go to smaller companies, like an agency for a big company, or like I got a magazine job, editor job, and upon learning I didn't have the visa, they withdrew the offer, even though they have sponsored other people before. All can come from all kinds of motives. Sometimes companies just don't have the funds. They don't bother going through the complex trouble and immigration, even though you can take the load off of them by giving it to a lawyer. Other times it can just be simply racist. That's it. Xenophobic, racist. You don't know. And companies will often ask the question, do you now or in the future need H-1B sponsorship, which I found to be very uncouth. And sometimes they screen you out just because you said yes. Other times, not so much. Had a British recruiter said she always answers no, even though the answer is yes. She's in England, and then she justifies herself in the interview. She tells them all the complicated stuff about immigration. She's always gotten American jobs in Britain, so she's living very well off as American jobs pay more. But that's number one. Number two is that if you ever get laid off and you're on an H-1B or you're on a visa, you have 60 days before you find another position. Different people, different circumstances, but in general, it's a very precarious place to be. Trigger warning, there was a Chinese employee at Meta who committed suicide because his whole livelihood will be upended because he was put on a PIP, a performance improvement plan. His manager doesn't like him. And if he loses that job, he'll have to leave America, the country that he spent most of his life in. And that is a position I want nobody to be in. On LinkedIn, if you scroll through, you will see multiple stories of international employees working at companies. They had accepted an offer, moved halfway across the country, only to have that offer withdrawn. Or they've started and they get laid off after 2 months. This happens over and over, and it's happening more increasingly often now. That if you don't have your visa is tied to the company, it doesn't just upend your money, your time, your family. You can be completely uprooted. You can be deported in 60 days. So get your visa sorted out with the green card. Last thing I will say, don't go for the H-1B if you have a PhD, go for the O-1. The O-1 visa, extraordinary ability, it gives you a lot more advantages. You can renew 3 years and then you can renew it every year. You don't have to go through the lottery. Same with the H-1B for nonprofit, don't have to go through the lottery. So that gives you a lot more freedom and flexibility.
Okay, I'm going to hold back my questions because there's a whole list here. So let me just read them out. If someone wants to pursue their passion or hobby as a career instead of following traditional paths like industry or academia, can you share some pointers to navigate the economic and psychological challenges of the initial transition period?
Okay. Yeah. So this is a question that's faced by artists for centuries. Artists have not been rich people. You look at the painters, the musicians, they are always sponsored by some kind of patrons. Every artist has to face this dilemma at some point. And I want to give you a distinction between a job, a hobby, a career, and vocation. This is from Elizabeth Gilbert, the author of Eat, Pray, Love. A hobby is something you do for fun. You can watch Netflix for fun. You can sing for fun. You can sing terribly for fun. It's called a pastime because you do it to pass time. You're not honing in on one skill. You're not trying to get better. You're just there for fun. A job is something you do. You trade your time for money. That's it. You don't have to like your job. You can hate your job. You just need the money. And most artists do a job so that it funds their career. What is a career? A career is something that you do consistently to build something. It's an identity. It doesn't make sense to have a career that you hate. You can hate your job and not have a career. But if you have a career, you better be sure you love it. The thing about a career is that it has to make you money somehow. So it fits into the trajectory of I have a career, I have things I can't say because I have to appease my editor, my whatever patron. They're funding your lifestyle, they're funding your passion for the pursuit of the thing that you're doing. Not everyone can have a career. Elizabeth Gilbert, she got very lucky. Her book went viral in a time with no social media. But with one Elizabeth Gilbert, you have hundreds of thousands, just like one Harry Potter, so many other failures.
Mm.
You have to stomach the possibility that you may never have a writing career, a painting career, an acting career, comedic career. You may have to do the job for the rest of your life. But now the fourth one is vocation. Vocation, I'm not religious, but the idea of it is it's something that you do because it's a part of who you are. You can't afford to not do it. You love it so much, it's in your bones. You want to do it even if you're poor, even if nobody recognizes you. All the artists in history, a lot of them, they die of poverty. They died of nobody liked them, nobody loved their ideas, but they do it anyway. And you have to decide if this is something that's similar to a vocation that you just want to do. The thing is, if you really want to do something, you'll figure it out. You'll figure out a way to do it somehow, very funnily. And you may just have to go through the ups and downs of doing a job that you don't like, having a boss that you don't like to fund the life that you really want to live. Now, this is the overall picture, but I want to give you one more, which is tied to this talk, that nowadays you can make a living as an artist or as something of a hobby because of the creator's economy. A lot of people have done it. You just have to figure out the new set of rules. And this is what platform do you want to get your ideas out? Where are your audience? Who are the people out there willing to pay for my expertise? And this expertise can be anything, can be crochet, can be building furniture. Just go on YouTube. Everybody has their own tiny niche that they found a huge audience in across the world. There's a whole different industry, how to market yourself, how to sell yourself online. But it's a lot easier than just 10 to 20 years ago, where you have all of these gatekeepers. Now you don't have that. You have you and the audience. You just need to find a medium to reach them. So I will say, easiest thing, get a job that pays you to be able for you to create. The second is to learn the new rules of the creator's economy that can make your dream come true.
And I'm reminded of a very good document, a very good research piece that was written by Andreessen Horowitz, which is one of the largest venture firms in Silicon Valley, about the creator economy. I think it's a16.com. You can look on there, but a really interesting breakdown across so many different industries and so many different methods. So wonderful. All right, next question. Does your program help people uncover what kind of personal stories they can start sharing on social media and how to start sharing that story? I think a lot of academics might find it daunting to start sharing their stories publicly since we're so used to being under scrutiny for everything we write.
Yes. That's also true in industry, by the way. One of the things I found, I left academia and industry is because I started censoring my thoughts. I wasn't able to put words into the thing that I'm writing. But you do this long enough, if you self-censor long enough, you'll start to see it starts to affect your whole being. It starts to affect your cognition. One of the TikTokers I was just seeing, she quit her corporate job. She started creating on TikTok. And the thing on TikTok is you have to be authentic. If it's fake, if it's something that other people's idea that you're just regurgitating, you will find failure really fast. Nobody will like what you have to say. The internet gives you immediate feedback. And she actually had trouble saying things that are so authentic to her because she's been masking herself for 10 years. She couldn't say, and then it became really hard to even say what she wanted to say. So yes, my program definitely goes through how do you create your first post? What do you even say? How do you start sharing your story? The easiest and I think quite irresponsible way is to say just share. My very first post on LinkedIn that probably got me the most a lot of the most engagement is I got so fed up all the crap international students have to go through. So I just say, like this is crap, and then these are 5 suggestions. Your thing has value to you. Your content has value to other people. Everyone has a story. If you've lived your story, that is authentic, that is value. And I guarantee you, hundreds of thousands of people around the world have lived that story or want to live the story that you have lived. They want to hear your voice, and it doesn't applies to everybody. You just need to have the courage to put it out there.
Okay, I'm going to paraphrase this next question that someone put in, which is that a lot of your examples are tailored to social networking, or kind of using social network services like Instagram or whatever else. Are there other approaches that are less reliant on social networks or social media, I would say? Anything you can say there, or are we basically tied to that mast in terms of, okay, you've got to have a social media presence or at least use social media in those ways?
Yeah, good question. So I go back to that one slide of mine, which is what does it mean to network? And before, when we didn't have social media, your network is if you look at your Facebook friends, it's like hundreds of people for people when you look at typical social networks. That network is very narrow. Typically, what people do to expand their social networks is they go to school, you meet a lot of new people, you meet faculty who introduces you to different industries, you meet people at work, and this is all the Silicon Valley events. That's it. And it's very limited. When we think about social media, we tend to think, oh, Facebook, but that's not it. Blog is social media. Amazon, if you published something on Amazon, that's social media. Podcasts are social media, interviews, Substack, Twitter, and then we get into the TikTok, Instagram, the typical things that we think of as social media. Books are a form of social media. Newspapers are a form of social media. They're all media, and they're by definition social because it connects people outside of your immediate social network. It connects strangers to you. It connects all of these serendipitous encounters. It maximizes the opportunity for it to occur. And that's the whole point of networking, is that you build trust with people with these people 5-6 degrees of separation to you. And then because of the value you offer, they give you a lot more in return because they like what you have to say. So is social media optional? Social media defined in a larger term? No, it's not, because it is the thing that cuts down the middleman. It is the thing that says to the gatekeepers, no, we don't need you. I'm creating my own thing over here. But in the narrow sense, no, social media is not optional. There are people who do this on blogs without showing their face, without showing their name. They're just putting something out there into the wild, and their ideas are working for them, 24/7 working for them without them having to do things. You don't have to, your different ways of presenting your ideas. But if you don't do any of that, then opportunities are not going to show up on your door. So you can either have your ideas work for you, or you have the opportunities come to you without reaching out to these people, which is a lot harder. So I would say it's a golden ticket. It's a great opportunity, and I would seize it before the market gets more and more saturated in however way you feel comfortable with.
That goes back to one of your slides, which is, who you know in 2010 and 2024, who knows you, and who's going to know you if you're not out there, at least in some form, in writing, in podcasts, in interaction, and so forth. So I think that's a great point. One question here is, what are your thoughts on positions in industry that require X number of years of experience for an entry-level position? And if you don't have that experience, should you still apply? Now, I would add to that maybe a sub-question, which is, what can graduate students do at any time in their PhD program to, kind of get that experience? Were you someone who looked for, kind of consulting clients or internships or something while you're doing a PhD, rather than waiting till you finish off and then you're kind of out there jumping into the ocean?
Yeah, I did not do that. And if I were to get an industry job, I would do it. I was very hell-bent on staying in academia. I loved academia, and I never thought, industry had a point. And after I worked there, I was like, yeah, it doesn't have any point. So not for me, but if it were something for me, I would start as early as possible to do an internship to get actual experience, because nothing speaks louder than the experience that you already have. One of the biggest questions in interviews or in hiring is this person a risk? We're making a bet on this person. Is this person going to come into our organization and become a liability? We have to hire again. Is this person going to sue us? How much is the person going to cost us versus how much is this applicant going to benefit us? And the way to assess that risk is to look at what past experiences have you had, because past behavior is the greatest predictor of future behavior. A lot of the things PhDs struggle is that they don't have that past experience to confirm I am not that much of a risk. So they don't know really who they're hiring. If you've had an internship experience, it signals to future employers, okay, this person knows industry speak. They know the way of industry. They know this world. They've been a citizen, an inhabitant of this world. They know how the world works. So it significantly reduces that risk. What I did to get me into Amazon, one of the core things, not an internship, but I did work with one of my faculty advisors who was a chief behavioral officer at a different company. So I worked on some company projects under NDA, but I did work on company projects. So then I can say, oh, I reduced cancellation by X percentage, or communicated with stakeholders using these languages, not just translating, but on actual projects. So any projects that you have that you can translate in terms of its practical impact, or if it's actual industry project, even if you did with like the dean's office, they were looking at student engagement, that is still better than, I went to the island of Tahiti and looked at, like some kind of anthropological remote kind of theoretical study. Yeah, so that I would say. The other thing I thought that jumped out from that question is the positions, companies looking for entry-level positions. If you're a PhD, you're not entry-level. I want you to cross out all of the so-called entry-level. You're so much more advanced than that. There's a very good article, a YouTube video called How Money Works, and it explains there's no such thing as an entry-level position anymore. Like, it's almost like you have to do all the work up front yourself. Even Google, Facebook had their own universities. You're kind of responsible for your own training now, which is insane. And then when they hire you, they want to hire you ready to work, hit the ground running. So you have to show them, hey, I am your person. I'm ready to hit the ground running. I've had experiences the skills that I can use to be successful in the role.
All right, I'm going to squeeze in one more question, and then if anyone has questions later, they know where to find you, or we'll tell them where to find you.
Yes.
So this question is sort of related to what you're saying. So what is your advice on getting a job in industry? For example, this person is looking for architecture, sustainability sector with a 4-year academic, 4+ academic job titles, saying, I often didn't get the job because recruiters said, 1, I'm too academic, although my curve before the US was not academic, and 2, you're overqualified. So here's the other side of your equation, not only starting an entry-level job, but you're out in the market with a PhD, and people are saying, well, you're too academic, too overqualified. How do you break out, how do you break that person's perception of you?
Yeah, so you can't change people's perception of you. They are going to think whatever they think. What I will say is, whenever people say something about you, you have to look at 2 things. One is the things that they say on the surface, the words on paper. And then the second is the hidden layer, which people don't like to admit. This is their deepest fears, anxiety, risk. What are the risks? Think again from the mind of the hiring manager or recruiter. You are too academic. You are overqualified. Nobody is overqualified. You are qualified. You're not overqualified. But the risk they're thinking is that this person is too entrenched in academia. This person may come into industry and leave because you've had so many academic experiences. Presumably you like it. You like some aspect of it. And now you're switching to a different mode of working. And then how do we know you're not going to leave? two things to dispel that fear, or two gates you have to pass. One is to get your resume through the door so that you get on the call with the recruiter so that you can justify, you explain your circumstances. Two is how do you excel in your interview process. So you have to continuously sell and convince them, hey, I'm not just an academic, I'm not too academic. In fact, I am very, very willing and curious to learn the new ways of industry, the sector that I want to get into. How do you do that? On your resume, you have to tailor your language very specifically to architecture, sustainability. Get resumes who are successful, the people who are in that sector. Look at when they went to that sector, what languages did they use? You have to use all of the language, no space wasted. Every word, every sentence, you're speaking the language of architecture and sustainability. Your resume has to look like the ideal candidate. Recruiter screens it and they're like, oh, I want to talk to that person. Second, during interviews, you have to continuously convince them and say, one, I'm passionate about the sector, and two, show concrete evidence that I know about the sector. I've talked to people in the sector. I've looked at the projects, and here's how my experiences fit. When you do that, you will find the right employers, and you will still get people who tell you you're not qualified, you're overqualified, and these are not your people. Your job is just to find that fit after you've done all of the things that you did to find the employers that will take a chance on you.
Mm. Well, Kaidi, this was incredibly engaging. We're out of time, but before we break, where can people find you? I know we're going to post this and we'll send people out an email, but where can they find you generally, apart from LinkedIn?
Yes. Apart from LinkedIn. So I have my LinkedIn. You can go to my website. It's posted on my LinkedIn. You will see all of my handles. I'm on Twitter. My name on Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, YouTube. I have my email listed as well. On my LinkedIn, you'll also see a couple of links. One is my newsletter. Encourage you to join me there. There I post a lot of in-depth tips. I'm not able to post on short form LinkedIn, Twitter platforms. I have a free guide that I will send out later that is on demystifying job titles. What are the hidden rules behind each job title? What's the difference between a quantitative researcher and a quantitative UX researcher? Big difference. What are the quant and qual skills, actual skills required for these titles, even though the titles don't necessarily tell you what skills, level of skill that you need. So grab that. It's an 8-page guide, very detailed. You can get that for free. And then it also has my academic trailblazer. I have a winter cohort coming up next month. I'm open for enrollment. And then we'll send out an application form after this. And this is an 8-week program where we'll go over each module. Each week we meet live course, go over aspects of job searching. How do you do your resume? How do you network effectively? How do you ace your interviews, do mock type of interviews? How do you negotiate? All the way to how do you make a living out of something that you're really passionate about long-term? How do you design a life that's really fulfilling to you?
Great. And I'll just remind everyone that this event is recorded. We're going to post it up on our website within 24 hours. So if you missed the 10,000 ideas that Heidi put out on this talk in an hour, you can certainly get back and listen to it again. But Kaidi, thank you so much for your time. This was incredibly engaging. You have a wonderful story to tell, and hopefully we'll let a lot of other people hear it as well.
Yeah, thank you for having me. I had a lot of fun.
All right. Thanks so much. Thanks everyone as well.